Bad Brad Berkwitt Show is all about moving humanity forward and fighting for democracy. And remember, folks, every act of kindness is a little love we leave behind. Hey, folks, the man with the pinky ring and the New York thing. Forget about it. Bad Brad Berkwitt. And welcome to the Bad Brad Berkwitt Show on the Ringside Report web TV channel. Forget about it. My guest today is known as one of the most beloved characters of the last 50 years. He was a greaser from 1977 to 1981. He was on a hit show playing this character that I'm about to tell you. You know it, Bowzer. My guest tonight is also an activist, an actor, and he truly knows his stuff. But without further ado, ladies and gentlemen, please welcome to my show, the one and the only, the beloved John Bowzer Bowman. All right, well, first of all, I have to say Bowzer, because you're always going to be Bowzer, even though it's John. Thank you so much for coming on my show today. I greatly appreciate it.
Oh, it's my pleasure. Yeah, I guess I'll always be Bowzer, and I don't mind.
It's a beloved character. It's a beloved character.
Yeah, I'm used to it. And Bowzer, Bowzer's been around since 1970.
Mm-hmm. We're going to talk about him. We're going to definitely talk about him.
It's a long time.
Absolutely. Okay, I always start out my 360 conversations like this. I do a lot of research. I watch a lot of clips on you, read a lot of stuff on you. But we know that the internet is not always correct. So, John, if I have something wrong in my notes, please feel free to say, hey, Brad, it's actually this, because the military in me wants it to be as factually correct as it can be. We don't want to be like the other side. We don't deal in alternate facts like Kellyanne Conway.
I'll do that, Brad, without trying to be too picky and nitpicky and fussy.
Okay. Well, let's do this. Let's start at the beginning.
Oh.
Go ahead. So we're gonna go back in time. Not as far back as like History of the World Part 2 with Mel Brooks, that far back. We're gonna go back a little bit.
The beginning is 76 years ago, Brad.
There you go. So you were born in Manhattan, New York at the tail end of the 40s, right after we came out of World War II. But what I would like you to do is talk about growing up in Manhattan.
Well, okay, so right away, I didn't grow up in Manhattan. And, I'm not even sure where I was. I was born at something called St. Catherine's Hospital, and I'm not even sure where it was.
Okay.
But the family was we were in Brooklyn.
Okay.
And really, my Jewish mother, okay, now this is intricate New York stuff that the rest of the country won't understand particularly well. But for a very long part of my life, like 65 years, I thought that I was born and my first 5 years were spent in Williamsburg, because that's what my mother kept telling us. But when I talked to my brother, who, by the way, was military like you, and traveled around all over the world, he actually retired as a colonel in charge of prosthetic dental operations for half the world. And he kind of fled the family for quite a long time, and then he reconnected, and I reconnected with him. And I must have been in my early 60s. It's about probably 13 years ago now or so, when I had this conversation with my brother Richard, where I was asking him about, because he was 10 years older than he is 10 years older than me. And I was asking him about the time we spent, the time in Williamsburg, because I could barely remember it, and I knew he could remember it much better. He said, stopped me at the end of the question, said, it was really Bedford-Stuyvesant.
Huh.
Like, what? For 65 years, 62 years, whatever it was, I've been telling people I was born, in my first 5 years were spent in Williamsburg. He said, well, Williamsburg was a better neighborhood. And, Mom, so she said it was Williamsburg. We were actually 3 blocks into Bedford-Stuyvesant. Our father was a dentist. His office was really in Williamsburg. It was a very long-winded explanation for the rest of the country. But I'm sure you understand with neighborhoods, and especially in New York, there's a new neighborhood every like 2 blocks.
You got that right.
Yeah, so I was born in Brooklyn. I was
Okay.
raised in Queens, extreme East Queens, in
Okay.
the top Swazi district. This is going to be an easy segue there into a little bit of politics. Tom Swazi, the district that we just won, last month, New York 3, the George Santos
Yes.
district. That was quite an experience. And as I'm sure we'll get to all the stuff about the 50s, but and the early 60s and all my love for that music, et cetera, et cetera. But I might as well throw in right here that for most of my career, we returned to an earlier, a simpler time, a time when the great pretender was not former New York Congressman George Santos.
And I
The
want to
greatest
know.
of the great pretenders ever.
Oh God. And I want to make a note. See, Wikipedia right out the freaking gate. Wikipedia said
Yeah, they're always wrong.
they're always
What do
wrong.
you mean?
Okay. So let's see if this one is right. You attended Juilliard School at the age of 12 with an expertise in piano playing. Is that true?
Yeah, that's true.
Okay.
That's true. Well, except for maybe the expertise part.
Okay. And
But yeah, I went to the Juilliard Preparatory Division. And
okay.
again, it was in extreme East Queens. It took me 3 subways and a bus to get there. Um, and uh, and I attended, for piano until I was 17, and it was time to go to college.
Okay.
Totally
And
true, and a lot of good stories come from it. And the
okay.
Bowzer character, in a way, comes from it.
Okay. Okay. And it looks like the year I was born, 68, if this is correct, you went to Columbia University.
Yes, well, that was when I graduated, which was a
Okay.
difficult year to
Okay.
graduate. Now, you probably don't remember this because you were just born, but it was a very turbulent year and an extremely turbulent year on campus at Columbia for a lot of good reasons. There was a lot of stuff, a lot of conflict having to do with relationships with the community and all kinds of stuff that went on in Columbia, and it was kind of a bit of a revolution there in my senior year. Somehow we all managed to graduate. Or I managed to graduate. We had a counter commencement. We all got up and walked out of the graduation and went and had a counter commencement on South Field, where Eric Fromm, the author of The Art of Loving, was our primary speaker. So this was really the beginning of honestly, my activism had begun in high school, but the Columbia years were kind of a continuation of my activism. I have to say that my activism probably really did begin at Martin Van Buren High School when I and several of my high school friends very memorably schlepped ourselves down to Martin Luther King's "I Have a Dream" speech, where we stood 50 million miles away in the mob on the mall.
Mm-hmm.
But we were big civil rights movement kids, and it was an amazing time,
Right.
for we're right now in the craziest time of my entire 76 years. But that was an amazing, the 60s were an amazing time for activism, among my generation.
Yeah. Yeah. My dad marched for King in 63. And that's when his whole civil rights thing started. My dad would have been 98 today, but that's when he started in his late 30s with King. Okay.
Right. We were like high school kids
Yep.
when all this stuff was happening, and we all tried to be as involved as we could while still, going to high school. But I
I bet you
graduated.
took flack. I'm sure you took flack too with those positions.
Kind of, but we were in a pretty liberal area, I would say. Uh, there was some, yeah, there was always some flack, and there were some things that I think we should. My particular generation, I think, has come to regret. I always tried to be pretty good about this stuff, particularly the Vietnam War stuff, where I think the thing we were worst at was making a distinction between the war itself and the people in the military who got caught up in
Yes.
it.
Yes. Yes.
And there's an area where I think we could have done better.
Mm-hmm.
with specifically returning people, and we're
Yes.
still fighting these battles today for I think no particular reason because everybody who came back had PTSD anyway, and no one knew what the mission was. The mission ultimately became um, trying to stay alive and trying to help your platoon stay alive.
Yeah.
Um, but the extent to which some people in the universe I was in sort of took it out on returning people, as if something was their fault
Right. It was a draft.
was
They had no
wrong.
choice. They had to go.
Right. They
Unlike
had no choice.
Donald Trump, who took 5 deferments.
Exactly. Now, in my case, they didn't take me. I got drafted like everybody else did. As soon as I graduated from Columbia, I got drafted. And this relates to the Bowzer character too in an odd way. I was 6'2" and weighed 127 pounds, and they
Oh
wouldn't take
gosh.
me. And I have to say I wasn't heartbroken because no one knew what the mission was. But I've also been notoriously unlucky in my life um, at winning things. Like I'm not, like don't take me to Vegas with you, that kind of thing. And I've only ever won one thing that I can think of, which was the very first draft lottery
Ah,
when I think it was General William Westmoreland himself reached into there was a lottery and they shook up all the days of the year, and he reached in and pulled out my date, September 14th. I was number one, but the Army had already rejected me.
right.
So it was really kind of academic. But this is off on a completely different topic than I ever thought we were going to
That's all right. It's your story today. It's for you to
get to,
shine.
Brad. But I really do think that for my generation and for the difficulties in a lot of ways that I have with, convincing my peers, my own generation to vote the right way on senior issues, which I work on 24/7.
And we're going to talk about that.
I really think that the lack of resolution of the Vietnam War has affected my generation for its entire existence. And we will all pass on with that never being really quite resolved, with there still being a conflict within this generation of what was that all about. And I worry a little bit about the Iraq War, about Iraq War veterans and that time period, people coming of age in that time period where it was also kind of a missionless war where no one was quite sure what they were doing there.
Mm-hmm.
How will it end up being resolved? Will there end up being how will history look at it? I think history looks at the Vietnam War in an unresolved way still.
I agree. Okay, I want to read something, John, then we'll talk about it on the other side. From my research on you, I see you talked about greasers picking on you as a kid that would lead to you becoming the character Bowzer, that, as I said earlier, gone on to be beloved for decades. Your dad said a funny quote that I heard you say many times about the Bowzer character. He said, I sent you to Columbia University so you could become a moron. Now, it's a cutting line, but it's a funny line nonetheless. Sounds like a Jewish father. Sounds like something my dad would say to me when I was a kid, but funny nonetheless. Was there any other, I know you talked about being picked on, but was there any other influences that helped you create the character Bowzer?
So my dad knew that was funny, and he was actually kidding. Um, so how family stuff relates to this? Well, this is a complex question you brought up. But it is true, and I referred to it a little bit earlier, that when I used to wait for the bus came before the 3 subways. So, and especially in the winter, it was really terrible because, my mother was kind of hypochondriacal, and she would often send me out in the winter with one of those horrible hats with the ear laps that strapped under your chin. So that was, as soon as I could get out of the house and just get this thing off of my head, and stuff it in the Juilliard briefcase, I would do it. But, sometimes I didn't act fast enough. And then, these greasers that used to hang out outside the Surrey luncheonette, where the bus stop was, would kind of, like try to strangle me with the ear laps and kick the Juilliard books down the sewer, and later on, when I did look at the greaser of the 50s through the eyes of the late 60s, early 70s, which I could say I think I was the first person to do that. It was way before, it was before Grease the Show, it was before American Graffiti, it was before the Fonz, it was way, well before Laverne and Shirley, before anything. I was just doing it out of my own memory to be in this group where I was the bass singer going bum 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 dang 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 ding, so I was just trying to figure out how to create a character that looked back at that time. And yes, those greasers that used to terrorize me for, at the bus stop when I was 12 and still skinny, like I was 10 years later, did become somewhat of a model for the Bowzer character. That is actually true.
Okay. All right.
And the fact that I had pipe cleaner arms. Now there's a lot more. This part of this discussion could go on quite a long time, because sooner or later I have to tell you the story that's been in my show for the entire time I've been doing it, since Sha Na Na, which is the story of my mother at Carnegie Hall and how this all ties together.
Go for it. Tell it.
Should we just go there now?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so Bessie Bauman, who I've already referenced for you, obviously when I was going to, started playing the piano when I was 7. I did enjoy it. I practiced as much as I could, although, my father's office was in the house in Queens, and my mother would often open the door. I could tell when she opened the door to the office, and that was my cue to try to play like Chopin's Minute Waltz in 30 seconds to try to impress the patients. And then, that's when practicing went out the window. But I did practice enough to get into Juilliard Preparatory when I was 12 and begin this odyssey when, of course, where was I supposed to play Bad Brad when, learning how to play classical music, especially in New York City? One day I was to grow up to play in, you say it, Carnegie Hall.
Yes.
Carnegie Hall. There was no other destination.
Okay.
There was no other destination but Carnegie Hall. So I'll be Bowzer now for a minute. So the year was 1973, although I actually think maybe it was 1971 when I actually look back at the facts. But Carnegie Hall, in desperate financial trouble, has turned to rock and roll. And who should be invited to perform at the fabled, the legendary Carnegie Hall but my old group?
Sha Na
Na. So there we are, Sha Na Na, on stage at Carnegie Hall. And in the third row of the audience was the only person standing in the entire audience of Carnegie Hall, my mother. Bessie Bauman, the woman who forced me to practice piano. She stood proudly in Carnegie Hall while her son sang Ram-a-Lam-a Ding Dong. And she waved and she shouted, "Jonathan," she cried, "Jonathan, you made it!" Because, Brad, it turned out that to your mother, whether it was Chopin's Minute Waltz or Ram-a-Lam-a Ding Dong, Carnegie Hall was Carnegie Hall.
I love it.
She couldn't have cared less. It was all fine. She didn't go, Then when the show was over, she went out to the merchandising table and she started signing autographs. Bowzer's mother.
Okay. Love it.
I said, "Mom, what are you doing?"
That's funny. Did you tell all the ladies did she play Mahjong?
She did play Mahjong.
Even tell all the ladies about her son was at Carnegie Hall?
Yeah. Even I knew how to play Mahjong at the time, although I can't remember now. But sometimes I was the youngest cousin, and there was a place we used to go to in the Catskills where Mrs. Savlowitz, Flo Levine, and my Aunt Fanny, would need a fourth for Mahjong. And they'd go like, "Oh, go get Jonathan. He'll play." I was like 8 years old, playing mahjong with Mrs. Savlowitz's Aunt
That's
Fanny.
funny. That's
Flo
funny.
Levine. Flo Levine was very important because her son Louis Levine, who played center field on the Hill. These people were all older than me, like 10 years, like my brother's age. Um, Louis Levine was on Channel 9 News. He was like an associate producer, and you could see his name on the credits, which was a tremendous big deal at the time. So we all looked for Louis Levine, it would say on the
There you
credits.
go.
Yeah.
Okay.
So later on, I always thought of that when the credits rolled on Sha Na Na. It's like, the friends and relatives are looking for, oh, there's Jonathan's name. Look,
You know they were. They were. You know they
they
were.
were.
Of
That's the
course.
way
That
life
doesn't
is.
matter. It's supposed to be like that. So, John, let me so in 70, you became a member of the beloved group Sha Na Na. Talk about
I did.
how you came into Sha Na Na. Who was the was you were you the creator or who created it?
No, I was the creator of the Bowzer character.
Right. I understand.
Sha Na Na was an outgrowth of a singing group called the Columbia University Kingsmen,
Okay.
which was frankly a ridiculous singing group that stood around in a semicircle and wore blue blazers and gray slacks and sang songs like "Oh, I Love the Halls of Ivy," and there were other songs like "Fat Pat" and "The Garbage Man Blue." I mean, this stuff was really like junk, and it was an organized King's Crown activity, what was called at Columbia, that had existed since 1884. And let me tell you, because we've touched on this a little bit, in the late 60s, there was nothing more irrelevant to the college experience than something like this singing group that stood around in a semicircle and sang college songs like, "Oh, I Love the Halls of Ivy." Because frankly, most of the students were occupying the halls of Ivy and refusing to leave and getting banged on the head by the tactical police force in New York City, which was marauding all over the campus on horses. So this was not the most relevant thing. And the Columbia University Kingsmen were always looking for some way to get more gigs because they actually really only had 3 gigs. The Barnard College lawn party, which was over during freshman week, the Yule log ceremony, which happened during Christmas week, and then in the spring, the St. Luke's Hospital Psychiatric Ward, 5th floor. Those were the 3 gigs. So we were always looking for more gigs and could never get any gigs. And then somebody, and no one really knows who it was, hit on the idea of looking at 50s music in 1969. And then there was a famous show at the Lion's Den where I used to do shows too. I was like, I would play the piano and sing show tunes and folk songs. And there was a famous show at the Lion's Den where the Columbia University Kingsmen shed their blue blazers and put on white turtlenecks and sang 6 songs from the 50s, like Little Darlin', I think was the first one, and the football fraternity, which at Columbia wasn't terribly meaningful because later on, I don't know if you know that the Columbia football team held the NCAA record for a long time, I think, of losing like 48 games in a row.
Oh, wow. No.
Yeah, it wasn't this team, but it was a little later. But Columbia was never known for its football team. But the football fraternity got wind of this and showed up at this show on motorcycles, greased up, and then there was one guy who was the brother of one of the guys in the Columbia University Kingsmen. George Leonard was really the guy who said, "You guys need to look like that." And that was the beginning of get greased up, look like that, show out under the stars. And then suddenly, a national phenomenon of this look at the 50s and 50s music through the eyes of 1969. And then a whole bunch of people quit because they were college students. And the Columbia University Kingsmen always had 3 freshmen, 3 sophomores, 3 juniors, and 3 seniors in the 12 people. So everybody had to decide, okay, what am I going to do? Am I going to, run around with this rock band now? which is seems like kind of a big deal, or am I going to do what I intended to do in the first place and go to graduate school or whatever it was? So a bunch of people quit right away, and one of the people that quit was the guy I replaced, Alan Cooper, who, believe it or not, became for his career the provost of the Jewish Theological Seminary in New York. And another guy who stayed in a little bit longer than Cooper was Rob Leonard, who's like a Swahili professor at Hofstra.
Okay.
You know, these are really
Diverse.
smart. Right, they were all Columbia students,
Right.
and they got universally replaced by people like me, who was the going bass singer on campus. You know, like I had done a lot of shows. I was trying to be in show business, and for me, it was a goal to run around with this rock band now. And the piano player, Joe Whitkin, was the original piano player. He became an emergency room physician for his entire career. And I'm still in touch with him. He lives in San Diego. He was replaced by Screamin' Scott Simon, who was the piano player of the celebrated Royal Pythons, which were the Stones cover band
Yeah.
at Columbia. You know, at that time, every college campus had a Beatles cover band and a Stones cover band. And so Screamin' Scott was, you know, again, another Columbia replacement. And the early replacements were Columbia guys replacing other Columbia guys. But the people who came in were people who were more interested in being in show business than the first set of people for whom it was kind of a fluke.
Okay.
That's what happened.
Okay.
Very detailed, but
That's okay. No, I want
yeah,
this.
people seem interested in this. It was a very strange, you know, set of phenomena that happened. And yes, I freely have to admit that, you know, one of the very first gigs that they ever played was the Woodstock Festival.
Right.
And I hadn't joined the group there yet. Everybody thinks I was there, but I wasn't. Alan Cooper, the guy that I replaced, is actually the guy who's singing at the Hop in the Woodstock movie.
Okay.
And, you know, since I became a proponent of something called Truth in Music much later.
Yeah, we're going to talk about that.
Right.
My notes.
You know, that's Truth in Music.
Right. Let me ask you just before we go to the next question, something made me just think about this. I may be completely off, but you know, the Bowzer character, you think that Travolta with Vinnie Barbarino copied a little bit of you?
Yeah, I think they all did a little bit. You know, I think
because I could see Bowzer, Vinnie Barbarino is kind of like, not completely, but kind of like the Bowzer character a little bit.
Yeah, I think they all did. I think, you know, the Fonz character, you know, and all that stuff, you know, Gary Marshall and Happy Days.
Yeah.
I mean, just because I really was documentably there first.
Right.
You know, because nothing, I think the guys who wrote Grease, you know, I think they said out loud, you know, that they'd seen us, you know, and modeled some of the stuff on us.
Okay.
You know, as I remember it, they were probably the closest to being when we were doing this. There were only two things that were going on that had to do with any of this stuff at all, and they were Sha Na Na and Richard Nader, who was a promoter, was doing some of these rock and roll revival shows at Madison Square Garden in the city. Those were the only things that were going on in the very late 60s that had anything to do with the music of the 50s and the, you know, the greaser.
Yeah. You know what, John, you just made me think of something. When Ricky Nelson Garden Party, because the Garden, right. And he was talking about they wanted him to sing the old songs and he wanted to sing them. He made me that just popped in my head, Garden Party. But yeah.
You're right. That's a true thing. That's a true thing. He was trying to move on.
Yeah.
From that. You know, now we ultimately ended up reviving it. You know, we had a very complex relation to it. Our first, I have often said, you know, and it's probably an appropriate venue for me to say it here, that there was something about the Sha Na Na experience that was a sociological phenomenon of the late 60s, early 70s, that I think had to do with that we were a little bit younger. we ended up starting the rock and roll revival. And we were trying to look at the music. We all loved the music. We all grew up with the music. We were like little kids with this music that started rock and roll. But we didn't necessarily love what had happened in the 50s, and like I didn't really love the guys that hung around at the bus stop on the Surrey luncheonette and tried to kick my Juilliard books down the sewer.
Right.
They were tough. One time my friends Carl and Erwin and I, we used to Erwin could really hit, and he used to hit humongous fly balls, and my friend Carl and I would try to run around and catch them in Alley Pond Park, until it got so dark that we could barely see Erwin swing, and then we just put our hands on our head, because we had no idea where the ball was. So one time we left the park after dark and got surrounded by basically a gang, and it was a bunch of huge guys, and then one little runty guy who wore the number 73, who to me was always known as number 73, and he was the spokesperson, and number 73 said something really articulate like, "Oh, hey, why don't you give us all your money or we'll beat the living blank out of you," and we had like $3 or something. And we gave them the $3 and they beat the living blank out of us
anyways. Okay.
Right. Because there were like 10 of them and there were 3 of us. Right. And that guy, number 73, more than any other single character, became the model for the Bowzer character.
Okay.
Who to begin with was a really tough greaser, but who could sing bass.
Right.
And later on, as television does to you, became your crusty but lovable greaser.
Yeah.
It was a mix. We were definitely spoofing the mores of the 50s, and I still have a lot to say politically about the notion that the 50s were happy days. I mean, they were happy days if you liked, segregated schools and kinds of
or misogyny
or how they moved on from.
Yeah, or misogyny. The women are supposed to be in the kitchen.
Misogyny, right?
Right. Okay.
Right.
Let me
place is in the kitchen, kind of thing. Absolutely.
Yep. In '77, you made it to TV in a classic Sha Na Na TV show. It lasted for 4 seasons until it looks like 1981.
Yep.
I can tell you this for a fact. My father and I never missed it. You had on, but people may not remember this. You need to go to YouTube and look at some of these clips. You had on amazing guests. I mean,
amazing.
Gary U.S. Bonds. You had Rita Moreno. You had Teresa Brewer. I mean, it just goes on. And you had just great guests. But the question I want to ask you is this. In an era today filled with so much garbage in reality TV that's not even real, why do you, John, feel networks don't have variety shows of years gone by? Because there was not just yours, there was a lot of them. And they were great. They were funny. They gave you everything. Singing, they had dancing, they had some dramatic stuff, they had comedy. They gave you all a great, diversity. Now you got a lot of reality garbage. Why don't networks run variety shows like yours anymore?
Money. Next question.
Yeah.
Seriously. Okay. So this is completely entangled with money. And the reason that you're saying, can you find clips? You have found clips of Sha Na Na on YouTube, right? That is true, but these shows, those 97 shows that we made, as soon as you get to around 100 shows, they're tempted to pull the plug on you. In the old days, they were tempted to pull a plug on you and on television because that's enough shows to run 5 days a week. So that's kind of what happened to us. But we did basically 100 shows. Those shows would still be on somewhere if it weren't for money. And the money that's involved here, it's an interesting conundrum. I'll give your audience a quick primer on this stuff. Music on television is very expensive because you have to pay the rights for the songs. And it really does come down to something called the publishing on the songs and also the writers' royalties. It's not performers' royalties, it's the songs themselves. And consequently, it's very hard to rerun old variety shows. And it's still very hard to do new variety shows because music on television is very expensive. And, in a way, that's for a good reason because people deserve to get paid. So the people who wrote the songs do deserve to get paid. But it's very hard to re-clear shows, what's called re-clear shows like the Shot on Our Television show, um, because the costs before you could even put those shows on the air, and I've produced a lot of TV, so I know this firsthand. The cost before you could ever even air the shows anywhere once is astronomical up front. And somebody would have to plunk down a lot of money, which they wouldn't get back for quite a long time. The best way I can explain this, the simplest, easiest way I can explain this to people is the old Carol Burnett shows, which were kind of combination, they were hour-long variety shows. They were kind of combinations of sketch comedy with, Carol and Tim Conway and Harvey Korman, and then some songs. When they got re-released and went back on television, they were released as a half an hour called Carol Burnett and Friends.
Yep.
And what did they do? They took out all the music.
Yep.
You had to pay for the music.
Yeah.
The sketch comedies, that was all done. It's modest royalties to the writers, and that's it. And there's no extra expenses. So this is the reason why you don't see a lot of variety stuff. Music videos were a little different because they were regarded as promotional. So the things like MTV could exist in the 80s and stuff like that. MTV could exist because it was promotional to sell records. You couldn't make that excuse for variety shows like the one we did. So it's just hard to rerun, and it's hard to do new ones. And it's probably, the Grammys will still exist, and, the CMAs and the various awards shows, because it's a limited amount of songs in a couple hours. But I doubt that there's ever going to be another variety series.
Okay.
And the corollary of that, which you touched on, is what's really cheap? Reality shows. You don't have to pay anybody anything. You just get some bozo to sit up there and go, you're fired. Oh, sorry, I'm hitting on a touchy subject.
Hey, that sounds familiar. I think I heard that one, and they gave him that line. He didn't come up with it.
It's very strong. I like the way, the way he said that. You're fired. He was very strong, like, kind of like Vladimir Putin or Viktor Orban.
Yeah, exactly.
Or like Mussolini,
or like all of us did in 2020 when we voted him out. We said, you're fired.
We did. Now we have to fire him again.
Absolutely.
But I will tell you that,
the
precursor of what we're really going to talk about on this program is I really do want to put it in people's heads that, because our side of things tends to be scared and terrified and worried and, all that kind of stuff. Don't worry so much. Just do the work. Everything's going to be okay. And remember, the difference between 2020 and now is that in 2020, the people involved were actually in power, and the issue was getting them out. Now, they are not in power, guys. It's different. It's completely different. They're trying to get back in, and that's a much harder task. It's going to be much trickier to go in that direction than the 2020 direction. So I think everybody, this is just looking forward a little bit to what's going to happen in 8 months or so. But it's the most important thing to keep in mind, that the entire dynamics of this are going to be different. And regardless of, obviously it would behoove our side of things to win convincingly and by a lot, because there's definitely going to be like, oh, that didn't happen, that's rigged, it's all.
Oh yeah, he's already started it.
right, it's already started. But remember, that's going to happen regardless. You know, it's going to happen if it's a narrow win, a narrow electoral college win, a gigantic electoral college win. It's all going to happen anyway.
Right.
The most important thing to remember is that Joe Biden is in the White House.
Right.
And this is no longer a matter of getting somebody out of the White House who doesn't want to leave. This is going to be a matter of those people who are going to claim all kinds of ridiculous things and probably threaten all kinds of violence and all kinds of, they're trying to get back in. It's a lot harder.
Yeah. Okay. I want to read something we'll talk about on the other side. I always love bringing up a chestnut that I find in my research on my guests. One for me was
show business.
What's that?
Are we back in show business now?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep. So one of the things that I found was when you performed in the 80s on my favorite show of all time, or 80s, I should say, is Miami Vice. Now, the particular episode that you performed on combined the Mafia, which is my favorite genre of movies, and Miami Vice. So you played Augie Lombard in an episode with Dennis Farina, and a very young Michael DiLorenzo would go on to popular fame, New York Undercover in the 90s. Talk about going on Miami Vice.
Well, okay, so now after Sha Na Na, and the reason I left Sha Na Na, I thought we'd done everything we were going to do together. And I had an offer to host the Match Game Hollywood Squares Hour, a whole other story. So I became a game show host for a year. I actually hosted another thing called the Pop and Rocker Game. I was like a pretty good TV host, obviously.
I remember.
Yeah, I didn't really pursue it, and I started doing Bowzer again, and it kind of took over. But I know how to host things. I mean, I'm okay at. I was really, in spite of creating the Bowzer character from like nothing, I never was a good actor, really. I just acting per se. So one of the few things I did was that Miami Vice episode, which I think I was terrible at it, but they were nice to me and all that. It was a lot of fun.
Big show at that time.
Yeah, Don Johnson said, "Wow, you must have a lot." One thing I'll never forget is that Don Johnson said, "Wow, you must have a lot of money." Like, why does he think? I guess it's rock and roll. Everybody thinks that rock and roll bands make humongous amounts of money, which sometimes they do. We had 10 guys. We split up everything equally, so we did fine. But it was no like Bonanza. I think.
Right.
I never understood why. This is the stuff.
Well, he went into music. Don went into music. He recorded.
Yeah, he went into music, right?
When he was dating Barbara Streisand.
Yeah, I mean this is all inside show business silliness, but it was a good experience. But my recollection of it is, I would hate to see it again. I'd love it if the Sha Na Na TV shows came back on, because I think they really were fun.
Mm-hmm.
And the music was really good.
Right.
And they were also largely funny.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it's a shame that people don't get to still see them. But my own acting career, it's like you could watch it, Brad.
So
thanks for playing.
There you go. So you talked about the game show stuff, which I had here, and
yeah.
You also were a VJ on VH1 early on, and
yes.
As well, I want to talk a little bit about something that you did for several years, and that's voiceover work in popular cartoons.
I did.
Talk a little bit about that.
Okay, so my perspective on that, which is one of my favorite perspectives in my life, is in 2022, I went to 35 campaigns and did endorsement events on senior issues with candidates who were good on senior issues. In 2018, I went to 57 campaigns. That's probably the most I'll ever do, because, I'm older now and it's just harder to do, and my health's been a little bit up and down. But literally in 2018, which was a great year for people who were good on senior issues and a great year for Democrats generally. I went to 57 campaigns. Now, the vast majority of people who work on campaigns are young. And if you say Shana to campaign workers, they're going like, okay, I'll Google that. You know, what are you talking about? And then they Google it and they go, oh yeah, look at that. But if you say you were a voice on Animaniacs, oh, Animaniacs, you're on Animaniacs, that's unbelievable. Oh God, I used to watch Animaniacs. I was 4 years old. You know,
Yeah.
so this is one way that I can really relate to people on campaigns.
Okay.
Is because yeah, I was a voice on Animaniacs. I was like the smooze on My Little Pony. I was some kind of oozing thing that rolled down a hill, you know, that was the villain. And I had a bit of a voiceover career, which was also fun. But I also, in my blunt, in my way at the age of 76, that I try to be as blunt and direct as possible, you know, and give people some insight into what I think reality is. You walk into a room where there are the people who are doing voiceovers on these animated shows can do the people who really do this can do every voice that there is known to man. And I walk in there, you know, a lot of times I would get hired to be like Bowzer. So they all knew that I was Bowzer. So these guys, like, you know, pick a guy, you know, Mel Blanc was the oldest guy, you know.
Yeah, I was thinking Mel Blanc when you said that.
But,
Yeah.
you know, Jim Cummings or any of these guys
Yeah.
lately, you walk into the room and you got like 7 guys go, hey, Bowz, how you doing? Hey, what are you, you know, they're all talking like Bowzer to you because that's what they do. And I would just immediately go like, you sound more like Bowzer than I do, and I'm Bowzer. So why aren't you just doing this voiceover instead of me? And the answer is they could easily do all of them, and I was never that skilled at that.
Okay.
So I did the best I could, but the people who do this kind of work are freaking amazing. That it is insane what capability the people who really do voiceovers have to change to do anything and anybody, you know, to imitate anything and anybody. It's just out of this world. It's a crazy skill set that some people have. And, you know, again, the best thing I'll ever do, you know, at this age, I think this is just for certain. The best thing I'll ever have done was be Bowzer, you know, as far as show business is concerned. And the other thing I'm really good at is getting people elected who are good on senior issues and using my, you know, semi-celebrity or whatever it is, you know, however anyone would care to define it, to get people elected who deserve to be elected. You know, and I do use my Columbia education. You know, probably I would have been a pretty good lawyer if I hadn't gone into show business. I do kind of think that way. And I might have gone into politics, you know, and I'm pretty good at that. I know, you know, because of the combination of show business stuff and understanding public policy, which I care about deeply. You know, I think that's the other good thing that I've done with my life is get involved in good public policy and try to advance it and try to get people into office who are going to try to advance it too.
Okay. That I want to segue into your activism side, and you mentioned
that's what I like to do.
Right.
That's what I love to do at this age.
Okay.
And you know, show business stuff comes up. That's great too. I'm doing my last few shows, you know, during this time period.
Okay.
You know, I'm thinking that my Mohegan Sun next year, which will be Bowzer's Rock and Doo-Wop Party, Volume 23. It'll be the 23rd year of this show that involves, Chubby Checker will close the show, and my friend Jay Seals Tokens, will be on there, and a bunch of people who still are great from the '50s and stuff like that. And I think that'll be my last show that I do.
Okay. Like I said, John, I want to segue into your activism side, which I commend you for over the years. The first thing I want to talk about is you went to bat for musicians in what was called Truth to Music, which is, from what I understand, imposter groups touring with the appearance that they were the original acts. Is that pretty much?
Yeah. So that was a combo thing. That was, and it was a big project. What I had discovered, because as I've just described to you, I do a lot of shows that I produce and where I hire people from the authentic people who created the music of early rock and roll, which I love and have always loved and still love. And what became obvious over a period of time, in the '90s especially, was there were all these phony groups out there that were preying on particularly made it even worse, the African American groups of the early days, the Coasters, the Drifters, the Platters, the Marvelettes, that had nothing to do with these groups at all. There were people who developed this into, it was like it was a cottage industry where you'd have unscrupulous promoters, agents, managers, whatever you wanted to call them, who had stables of these groups. That they do it cleverly too. They wouldn't do it randomly. They do it cleverly. Like they find somebody who quit the group 50 years ago, and they find their brother and get a license, get some piece of paper that then they send around to agents that gave them the right to use the name the Drifters, supposedly. Only the person didn't own the name the Drifters. And then it mushroomed into this thing where people, and it was a double whammy because you're getting it from both sides. The artists, the real artists that actually do own the names, are sitting at home wanting to work, but they're getting undercut by these phony groups. And in the meantime, the public actually thinks that they're seeing the group, or at least something related to the group. So they're paying good money to see what's basically a tribute band at best, that's not identifying itself as a tribute band. So the public's getting screwed too. So everybody's just getting screwed. And theoretically, trademark law was supposed to work, but as you can see in the 88 indictment counts of what's his name, we're getting a pretty good dose of how badly the legal system really does work in America. And the Truth of Music era was very closely related in the sense that whoever had the most money, these guys are putting out these phony groups all over the place. So they got a phony group going in Seattle at 8 p.m. playing, and now there's a group of Platters in Seattle at 8 p.m., a group of Platters in Tampa at 8 p.m., a group of Platters in Boston at 8 p.m. Money's flying in from all over the place, right? Which therefore then they go on offense and sue the real people to tie them up in court, knowing that they don't have the money to defend themselves.
Well, that sounds like somebody we know.
It was horrible. It was horrible. So I took it upon myself as somebody who understood what was going on, and thought I could do something about it, to get a law passed in 34 states, working through something called the Vocal Group Hall of Fame, and a bunch of us, but it really was kind of, I was the quarterback of this for sure. And got a law passed in 34 states that was able to put a stop to this, and without getting into conflict with U.S. trademark law, which you can't get into conflict with. So Truth in Music basically says that you have to have one person from the real group that created the name, the reputation of the group, and was on the original records, that has a continuing right to use the name, or otherwise you're a tribute group and you got to identify yourself as such. And in practical terms, this actually worked pretty well, because we were able to put a stop to most of the fake groups, without having a lot of complicated court cases. And the reason was because agents stopped.
And you said you got a bill passed, John? A bill?
Yeah, we got a law. We got a law in 34 states.
So you got bipartisan, obviously Republicans and Democrats.
Totally.
Right.
Totally,
Okay.
totally. And I learned a tremendous amount about how to work with both sides. You cannot, it's a total digression in a way, but never fight from the minority side of a legislature. You will just get stuck in committee and you will never come out. So if you're in a Republican majority, you've got to have Republican sponsors. You can have a Democratic co-sponsor, but you got to, so you have to learn how to work with both sides. And this was a pretty good, at that time, bipartisan or nonpartisan kind of issue. I will say Democrats were easier to work with than Republicans on it, uh, because Republicans, the bugaboo was, why do we need any new laws? Republicans are often resistant to, like the laws we have should be good enough. And I would have to explain to them oftentimes, have to explain to them like, okay, but the law we have so far just doesn't work. This is just the hard, cold reality of it is it's not working. We're going to have to strengthen it. We got to come up with something better. And usually I was successful in doing that. Like, for instance, I ended up getting one Republican, Michigan, which is kind of a split state. And at that time they had a Republican Senate, state Senate. And I ended up getting Mike Bishop, actually, who later became a congressman, who was super conservative. But I ended up getting him so enraged about somebody booking phony Marvelettes at in Pontiac, at the biggest arena in Pontiac, that he ended up being one of the best sponsors that we had anywhere.
Wow.
And he had started out somewhat resistant.
Right.
So it can be done, or it could be done in those days. I worry a little bit about this Republican Party today, where it just seems to be a different kind of thing.
I don't call Republicans anymore. I call them MAGA.
Yeah.
Not.
Right.
Even,
it's not really
no,
the old Republican Party.
no,
I mean, I understand, I think we all understand some version of conservatism that's intellectually honest, and that goes down the line with things like smaller government, less intrusion into people's personal lives and stuff. But this isn't that at all. This is like, yeah, we
right.
we're all over you when we want to be, and then we're not, whatever. It has no intellectual honesty at all. It's just the whims of a projected strong-man.
Yeah.
But it was a great experience getting Truth in Music done. And the reason there were 34 states and not 50 so far, and maybe I'll get back to it at some point in my life, although I'm getting older. But the reason was I went for the states that had the problem first. And, it was largely in the doo-wop universe. So places where doo-wop isn't really, like, okay, we don't have Truth in Music in Montana, let's just say, or Wyoming.
Right.
Because they didn't really have the problem. So those are kind of the 16 states or states like that. The entire Northeast, is covered. Florida, Nevada, the industrial Midwest, Michigan, Ohio, every place that had the problem, including Wisconsin, Minnesota, where this music is still really popular. We did manage to get Truth in Music done, and I'm glad we did it, and it basically worked, and it was a really good civic lesson that also helped me later in my senior issues work.
Okay. Let's segue into some politics. I want to read something to you because I like to give my viewers context. It's a little bit lengthy, but I want to get I'm reading this as the 50% European Jew side of me. This is about Trump. I'll ask you a question after this part.
Yeah, this is the right territory, I think.
There you go. So, like I said, first from my 50% European Jewish side of me, which that's my dad's. In February 2018, the U.S. government made it known that it would open its embassy in the building of the U.S. consulate compound in Jerusalem, South's neighborhood of Arnona, in May that year. Thereby bringing at the time, President Donald Trump's plan to do so forward by about a year. The move was scheduled to coincide with the 70th anniversary of the establishment of the State of Israel. They sent a U.S. Delegation there on May 14th for the ceremony, which was Steve Mnuchin, I can't even say his name, Steven. You know what I'm talking about. There you go.
Yeah, Mnuchin.
There you go. He's something else with an M. Ivanka Trump, Jared, I solved every crisis in the Middle East. Kushner and congressmen for both parties praised the move. Democratic Senate Minority Leader at the time, Chuck Schumer, said the move was long overdue. Well, here's where I want to go with this. Trump is an out-and-out anti-Semite, which we both know, and was never seen more than with his remarks in Charlottesville when he said, and I quote, "Very fine people on both sides. I've attacked them for this for years. Very fine people don't call Jews the K word, and they don't call black people the N word, and they don't march with tiki torches and say Jews will not replace us, blood and soil. And very fine people don't fight for Confederate statues that were all about slavery, contrary to what Nimrata Haley first answered when the question was it fought over slavery, and she couldn't answer. So one other point that I want to bring up for my viewers is his daughter converted to Orthodox Judaism because of her husband, Jared Iran, the Middle East Kushner, and her kids are being raised Orthodox. But the father and the grandfather is an anti-Semite. So my question to you is, I've talked to, I won't say a ton, but some Jewish people that say, well, he moved the embassy. I said, okay, you're excited that he moved the embassy. I don't know enough about that to talk that intelligent on the embassy part, but it's okay that he's an anti-Semite and all this. So we hold our nose and we close our ears to all of that because he moved. Even Jimmy Kahn, the late Jimmy Kahn, the actor, I watched him in a clip talking about this particular thing, saying that, well, I like Trump because he moved the embassy. So everything else that he feels towards the Jewish community is okay. So my question to you, John, is this. How can Jewish people sit here, some, and vote for this man knowing how evil and anti-Semitic he is?
If you don't understand by now that everything that Donald Trump does is strictly to further his own interest, and his own interest is absolutely nothing but gaining power and or money. Those seem to be the only things that Donald Trump is interested in, period. He, look, okay, I'm married to a psychologist, so I think I probably do have the advantage of knowing that, and I'm a smart enough person, I can read DSM-5, where Donald Trump ticks off every box under narcissistic personality disorder. I mean, this is a guy with a personality disorder. This is a guy, and they're not curable. And people who have it don't go in for therapy. He's not going for therapy anytime soon. He's trying to take it out on you, us, this country. So all of this stuff, fine. Okay, that was nice. That's because he thinks he's going to get the Jewish vote. He's going to get more of the Jewish vote. So he did that. He thinks, he makes periodic comments to try to get himself more of the black vote or more of the Hispanic vote or
but
whatever.
He insults them when he does it. But he insults them with the sneakers. He says, they have people going to fight. The sneakers, black people like that. They look at the mug shot and they think that's good. Black people, it's so...
Because it's all fake. Because it's all completely fake. It's just a manipulation. The entire thing is just a manipulation. Whatever he does is just a manipulation. There's nothing that he ever does that's not for gain for him. That's all there is to it. It's not complicated. A lot of Republicans or former Republicans and independents over the course of time, and this is one reason that I'm pretty optimistic about what's coming down the pike in 8 months, are onto this. People have figured it out. I think a lot of Jewish people have figured it out. By the way, I also think that Benjamin Netanyahu, to digress slightly, but not that far, Benjamin Netanyahu may not have a personality disorder precisely, but he's got a lot of the same corruption problems that
The
Trump
Jewish
has.
Trump. He's the Jewish
Right.
Trump.
He is Trump. I've said this on Twitter, very clearly that just think Benjamin Netanyahu is Trump.
Yes.
Trump is probably a little bit worse, but I don't know. I don't know. I mean, you could even argue that Trump in his 4 years never did anything quite as egregious as allowing the biggest security breach in the entire history of the country to take place on his watch. I mean, January 6th was pretty bad, but October 7th was pretty bad too in Israel.
Yeah.
So I think we can fairly say that Bibi Netanyahu was clearly distracted by his own corruption problems, clearly distracted by his own desire to restructure and decimate the judiciary in Israel, which there were a lot of protests in the streets going on at that time, and also clearly on a mission to elevate Hamas at the expense of the Palestinian Authority, which was no great bargain. Admittedly, the Palestinian Authority certainly was better than Hamas, but they thought they could manage Hamas. This was a strategy, guys. So it's he's going down. Netanyahu, it's just a matter of time. Israel will not tolerate the perpetrator, the guy who on his watch allowed the biggest security breach in the history of the country to be in charge for very much longer. He's just getting away with it because he continually maintains that it's wartime. It's wartime. It's wartime. You can't change governments in wartime. But that's a little bit of a digression, but I don't mean it that way because I think you can put Netanyahu and Trump in a fairly similar bucket. But if anything, Trump is crazier. He's certainly not as well educated.
No.
He's certainly not as smart.
And I feel bad. I feel bad for President Biden, and he's got to deal with Bibi. Biden is coming in good faith. He's getting attacked by many. I'm sorry to say, the younger generation that doesn't understand what this genocide Joe bullshit. I mean, come on, right. Hamas. Well, they put in their mind Hamas is. And some of these young groups are as bad as the maggots at these rallies. With them, Putin's a good guy. Hamas isn't what they make it out to be. What are you talking about?
Well, I talk to them all the time, and it's part of what I'm going to do on this election is Jewish outreach, even though senior issues is my main thing. I do. It's very hard. It's very hard to be somebody who's old enough to remember. Speaking of my mother, as we did earlier, when I was supposed to play at Carnegie Hall, she also in the basement. In our unfinished basement in Queens, she mimeographed the Hadassah newsletter, which was mainly about Israel, in my childhood, the infant state of Israel. I was born 1 year before Israel became a country.
Right.
This was a very, very big deal, a very, very big deal to Jewish people, of that generation, of her generation especially, and even of my generation. But I understand the context has been lost. And nothing makes you crazier when you hear about when they start conflating Zionism with genocide. You're just going like, oh my God, how are we going to figure out our way out of this? But actually, I think we are going to figure out our way out of this controversy, because I think that most rational people of any generation actually have a fairly similar take on this, and it's going to become closer and closer together. They're going to come close. We're going to come closer and closer together as this next stretch of time wears on. It's not only easy, but it's appropriate and it's right to be in favor of the state of Israel, to understand that the state of Israel is always going to exist, and at the same time to be deeply against the actions of this Israeli government and
Yeah,
the slop,
right, Palestinians, right,
right, the just whatever you want to call it, the
right,
sheer
right,
the magnitude of the sloppiness and
right,
the uncaring, towards innocent civilians.
right,
We cannot become, if you think there's been something wrong with them, don't become them.
right.
That's the worst possible thing you can do. Don't start acting like Hamas, guys. That is never going to work, and there's never going to be, again, in the world of bluntness. Um, there is never going to be a solution to this that's not a two-state solution. The
And
only
that's what
solution
Biden
that's
wants.
ever going to be is a two-state solution. So when you have a government that is against the two-state solution and is in league with the craziest fanatics in its own country, there is no hope. There is no prospect. And you're going to have to get rid of those people, get them out of power. Just like we have to get we have to make sure, well, let me not contradict myself. We don't have to get Donald Trump out of power. He is out of power.
Right. We need to
We
keep
just have to
him
keep
out.
him out of power.
Right. Right. And to your point, President Biden has always said he was for a two-state solution. That's his thing.
Always. And Brad, how many decades? I do want to say this on your podcast here. It's been a very long time for me. I feel like that I've been defending both President Obama and President Biden on their attitudes towards Prime Minister Netanyahu. I mean, there was for 8 years we're going like, and with other Jewish people, for 8 years I feel like I've been having the argument. Well, Obama really doesn't get along with Netanyahu, and I would go like, yeah, Obama doesn't get along with Ted Cruz either. Well, you find that surprising? Like, of course he doesn't get along with Netanyahu. Netanyahu's a right-wing nutcase.
Right.
Why would he ever get along with Netanyahu? And then people start to go like, oh, yeah, I guess that's true. That kind of makes sense. I mean, there's a relationship. Biden will come out and say, I've known Netanyahu for like 40 years or 50 years or whatever it is.
Yeah.
That doesn't mean he likes him.
No, it doesn't.
Doesn't mean he thinks he's right about anything.
Right. Right. Let me ask you this, and it's a doomsday question. I got to go the opposite way with this. I know you and I are going to do everything we can to ensure that Trump never gets back in. However, the doomsday question is this. If Trump does get back in, it's possible. What happens to America, in your opinion?
Okay, we can't go there. I am in the business of not going there. That really is doomsday. We just need to win. I am determined to keep us focused on winning. The whole problem with Democrats, and I think it's less true of Republicans who are coming over and independents, but I'm super conscious of with Democrats is we're always freaking terrified, and we're always worried and we're always scared. And what if this happens? And what if that happens? No, just do the work and we're going to be okay. If the worst happens, we'll worry about it when the worst happens. But we are the cavalry. If anything is clear during this last time period with the court cases, where then everybody's going, oh, I'm so worried about the court cases because it's never going to come to trial. Okay, stop worrying about the court cases. You have no control over the court cases.
We vote. That's how we defeat them.
Right. Worry about the election.
Yeah, I agree.
We can win the election. There's no reason to think. I would much rather, it's like my friend Simon Rosenberg says this clearest and best all the time. I'd much rather be us than them. Much rather. Much rather. Every day that goes by, Donald Trump, bloodbath last night, who uses language like that? Every day that goes by, there's a new ridiculous thing that he says or does And I do think the court cases are, especially the loss of money. He's only interested in money and power. And I think people are underestimating the impact that all this money that he's going to actually have to pay has on him,
Yeah.
because I think it
There
makes
I
him
agree. Yes.
I
Yes.
think it makes him sloppier. I think it makes him
Yes.
anxious.
Yes.
I think he hates it. It makes him
Mm-hmm.
angry.
Embarrasses him.
And right, and it makes him sloppier.
Yes.
So he says worse and worse stuff. And all he's doing with everything that he says, all he's doing is buttressing the votes of the same MAGA crowd that he has already
Yeah,
over and
it
over and
hasn't
over
grown.
again.
It hasn't grown.
Right. He already lost by 2.8 million votes once, right? And the Electoral College screwed us, which is a separate problem. But remember, he lost by 2.8 million votes to Hillary Clinton. Then he lost by 7 million votes to Joe Biden. I maintain he hasn't added one. He's only subtracted from those totals. He
Okay.
hasn't added one vote in this entire stretch of time. Zero. Forget the polls. They don't mean anything. They're probably all wrong. There's 8 months to go. There's a million things. If you look at crosstabs, they make no sense. Like, oh yeah, they're really tied with women. Do me a favor. That's a joke. The truth is, he hasn't, there's no rational universe in which he's added anybody
I
as
agree.
a voter for him. He's just subtracting, and every day he subtracts more. So just do the work, do focus. I hate this, but it's true. For the presidential, ultimately, we're going to have to focus on the battleground states because that's how people get elected. I'm in California. Does your vote really count in California? No, not really. If you want to do something useful, make sure that you pitch in to making sure we win Pennsylvania, Michigan, Wisconsin, Arizona, and Georgia.
Right.
Yeah, that's true. Also, make sure, because I have pretty good confidence that we're going to beat Donald Trump, win the House and hold the Senate.
Yeah.
Take back
I've
the
been saying
House
that.
and hold the Senate so that we can have a decent uh, Congress. We can deliver a decent Congress to Joe Biden when we do win. But don't worry about what happens if we lose. Do not worry about it. Just put it out of your mind in the same way that you put out of your mind arguing with your most MAGA relatives who are never going to change their vote, and it's just a waste of time.
Okay.
Worry about, work on, don't worry about anything, but work on persuadable people you might know, especially in those battleground states, connecting into organizations that are working those battleground states if you want to work on the presidential, or if you're in an area where you can you can put in some time and influence a House race or a Senate race, even if it's not a battleground state, be sure to do that too. And everybody, like to me, I told you earlier in the program that, in the 60s, I got drafted, but they never took me. This is my military service to the country. I've been doing it since 2004, and I do feel like this is public service and a give back that I'm doing to my country because I didn't ever serve in the military, to try to make this a better country, get better people elected who are going to move us forward. And right now we are truly in code red, emergency. All the flashing lights are going off because Donald Trump and the MAGA crowd really are trying to turn us into Russia. And I don't think
Yeah, right.
there's no mystery about it. They're
No.
admitting it.
But John, they have no clue what a dictatorship looks like. They say it at these rallies, and oh, Putin's a good guy. I don't care if you didn't like Reagan, Papa Bush. I don't care, Eisenhower, whoever. Fine. None of them would have ever said Putin was a good guy if Putin was in power during their times. They wouldn't. They just wouldn't. But they
Well,
do.
now let's be fair. Let's be fair. Tucker Carlson went to
Oh,
Moscow
don't even get me
and
started.
and and took a shopping cart.
Yeah.
Was that not the most ridiculous?
John, he pissed me off so bad. I was going to come back out of retirement out of boxing, and I challenged him in 3 rounds in a ring. Charity. Put up money for charity. You put up your money, I put up mine, just so I could legally put my hands on him in a boxing
This
ring.
is another guy who's just like Trump, where
Yeah.
the objective is, we all lived this with Rush Limbaugh for how many years?
And then
It's
he
like,
got a presidential medal, whatever.
right. But do you really, did you ever know? Let's because now you're a little bit in the show business side of this stuff. It's like I can't tell you what Rush Limbaugh ever thought about anything. The only thing that I know that he ever thought about anything, and the only thing I know that Tucker Carlson thinks about anything, is that if I shovel this BS to these idiots,
Yep.
I can make $50 million a
Yep.
year.
Yep.
That's it. Beyond that, I have no idea what these people actually think.
Nope.
They just know that they can make boatloads of money and then this is what Trump is.
Yeah.
He wants money. He wants the money and he wants the power. And that's all he wants. And I have no idea what I don't think
he doesn't know what he actually wants. I've never seen anybody get up at a debate stage and talk nothing about policies. Word salad makes no sense. If you ask him the minute details of something, he doesn't know. That's why he calls people names and comes up with it, because that is the shiny object that he throws in their faces. And that's what they remember. And they told him early on, throw as much bullshit out there and they'll forget the last thing you did, move on to 10 other things. And the mainstream media, unfortunately, fell into that same act and does the same thing. They cover, they're on one story that they should stick with for a little bit. They move on to the next because it's not 24, 48-hour news cycles. With Donald Trump, it's really like 24-second news cycles because he does something every minute that's crazier than the last minute.
And this is it is a real problem. The media really is a problem. And I am hoping still that they'll come around before November, at least to some extent, because they just can't keep doing this with this guy.
They are.
You got it.
They are. I hate to say it. They
So
are.
far, it's still been terrible. So far, they haven't improved.
Well, you called out one on your Twitter feed last night.
I do it all the time.
Yeah, like I'm turning you off because this is ridiculous, and I do the same thing. I'm like, this is ridiculous. I mean, to me, one of the one that calls him out the most for me is Lawrence O'Donnell. I mean, Lawrence O'Donnell goes at his jugular.
I agree.
So, but all right,
the most consistent of everybody really is Lawrence O'Donnell, where he just says it and you got to hit this guy and all of them between the eyes.
Yes.
And, I did love, let me just add in right here, that piece that you forwarded of the guy who was an ex-Republican who talked about what this is really about. That was an excellent piece. And I hope everybody has seen it, because it's something I thought it was excellent because it's something that I say all the time. And sadly for me, the way I would put this is the following. For 55 years, I've traveled this country. I can barely find a corner of America that I haven't been in, doing shows or doing political stuff, mostly doing shows. I mean, I've done shows in every state, except for one, Wyoming. But I've been to Wyoming a lot because it's beautiful. So I've done shows in 49 states, and I've been in every corner of every one of those states. And I really am sad to say, folks, that the underlying thing about the MAGA crowd really is the bigotry.
Yes.
It just needs to be said more. It's in every corner, and especially being Bowzer, who some people thought like, okay, this guy really is like Bowzer, so maybe I can just say the N-word and he'll think it's fine,
And there's probably ones that when they find out you're Jewish, they don't like that.
Or whatever. I mean, it's all kinds of stuff. But people would confide in you because they think they know you from television.
Right.
And it's just over and over and over and over again. And to that extent, the Trump thing doesn't surprise me that much, that there's this underlying layer ignorance compounded with bigotry
Yeah.
that sadly runs through our country, and we just have to beat it. There's no way out of it but to defeat it.
Well,
Uh,
that's
and it's the reason why when you work elections and the urban areas where everybody has to live together are blue. The rural areas where everybody doesn't have to live together are mostly red. And the fight is in the in-betweens, in the suburbs and the exurbs, because still a very central issue to all of it, probably the most central issue to all of it, is those people need to stay there and not come here.
yeah.
And that's what matters to me.
Yeah.
And that's really the fight that we're fighting. And
Right.
the dog, you could call them dog whistles, but actually they're out in the open.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And Trump. Yes. Before we segue, I want one talking point of what you said. That's why I hate that slogan, "Make America Great Again," because America was never, if you want to be honest, it was never great. It was never great for African Americans. It was never great for women, for Native Americans. But what I do say, and I do mean this from the heart, is we'll never be great, but we have the potential to be so much better. Because those people that are racist, they always say, "Oh, they're in a Fox bubble." No, they were always like that. Fox is their vessel to say, "Oh yeah, I feel like them," or Trump to be a dog whistler about their anti-Semitism. They came out of it. He was going to drain the swamp. He didn't drain the swamp. He lifted them up out of the swamp and put them right next to him at the rallies. Because and I always also remind people too, and then we're going to segue, but I also remind people too that don't just get wrapped around the rallies. There's very wealthy people that want those tax breaks that don't want anything to do with the Trump stench. But they give money, dark money, or however you want to term it, behind the scenes, and are perfectly fine with anything he does because he gave them 3 justices on the Supreme Court. He got the tax break passed through. He was their useful idiot for them. One more point I'll make. It's so sweet to see Mitch McConnell leave with his tail between his legs, because Mitch McConnell is one of the rottenest bastards of them all, and he enabled him because he knew he could use him as a useful idiot because he knew he didn't know anything about government. But now Mitch has to endorse him, which he said he wasn't going to do. Now he's endorsing him, and he has to leave after his long and illustrious bullshit career that he had with his tail between his legs. And the biggest tale for him is the fact that McConnell allowed Trump to call his wife Coco Chow, which is very racist, and he said nothing. Just like Ted Cruz. He called his wife a pig and said his father helped kill Kennedy. And now he's down there kissing the ring at Mar-a-Lago worse than anybody else, and his 2 sizes too small sport coat. That's the MAGA party at its best is what they are. But let's
sadly,
do this.
Go ahead. Don't kid yourself that sadly McSatan is still patting himself on the back for stealing the Supreme Court.
Yes, of course. But he's not leaving the way he wanted to. He's not leaving.
Greatest accomplishment of his but he's going to console himself.
Yeah.
Right. He's not leaving the way he wanted to.
Right.
He's still busy consoling himself with, but I stole the Supreme Court. I'm really the guy who did that. And he really is the guy who did that.
Absolutely. He wouldn't let Obama. They wanted Merrick Garland, right? He wouldn't let them take a vote.
But it's just completely unconscionable. I mean, the level, we've learned over time that the word hypocrisy has too many syllables to really work for us very well.
You got that right.
That level of hypocrisy is just, 11 months delay on Merrick Garland and then slam Amy Coathanger Barrett through in 3 weeks.
Yeah.
Like,
exactly.
Do me a favor. But it's all just power. That's where it really
didn't Lindsay say, use my words against me? And then they use it against them, and they move on to the next thing. All right, let's do this. Let's take a short commercial break, and then we'll segue into the second half. Just the random fun questions that I know you're going to have fun with. All right.
Okay.
folks, this is Bad Brad Berkwitt, the host of the Bad Brad Berkwitt Show on the Ringside Report web TV channel. And I want to talk to you about sponsorship. If you're interested in being a sponsor on the Bad Brad Berkwitt Show that features network guests and entertainers and people from all walks of life in business and other areas, reach out to me at ringsidereport2014@gmail.com. Again, that's ringsidereport2014 @gmail.com. I'm finally in a position that I'm ready to take on sponsors. So, hey, reach out to me and let's get you on board. I want to talk to you about my book, Boxing Interviews of a Lifetime. If you watch my show, The Bad Brad Berkwitt Show, you know that I love doing 360 conversations with all types of people. Well, I made my bones in boxing over a quarter of a century ago, interviewing world champion boxers, people in the sport, and entertainers that love the sport of boxing, which led to my induction into the Florida Boxing Hall of Fame in June of 2021. And that's the ring that you see me wear all the time on my show. Well, if you like to pick up my book, Boxing Interviews of a Lifetime, go to authorhouse.com. Again, it's authorhouse.com. And if you would like to get it personally inscribed or inscribed for somebody that you're sending it to as a gift, you can reach out to me and we can arrange for something as well. All right, we're now back with John. I'm going to have to say it, Bowzer Bauman, because you're always going to be Bowzer to me.
That's
I love
fine.
the character. I love that character. All right, I'm going to throw some questions out to you. Whatever pops in your head is the right answer.
Okay.
What is your favorite genre of movies?
Oh, boy. Genre of movies, I still like, I just like really well-crafted scripts, you know. I don't care what so-called genre they're in. You know, the best movies of all time, you can't pigeonhole any of them, you know, into a genre. I
Okay.
don't have a preference.
Then do this. Then do
But
this.
there are certain scripts that are taught.
Okay.
You know, I went through a period. I went through a period of studying the scripts that are taught. I also have a daughter-in-law who's the showrunner, the co-showrunner on a show called The Bear.
Oh yeah, I was told to watch that.
It's great.
That's about the deli, right? Is it about a deli in Chicago?
Yeah, it's about a sandwich shop.
Yeah, in Chicago.
Yeah, in Chicago.
Yeah.
It's terrific, but you know, like you can't even pigeonhole that show. They won every possible comedy award that they could win, like this year, but they're not really a comedy. I mean, it's a dramedy. It's something in between.
Okay.
And you know, story is story. You know, things that are funny are very hard to do because you got to have that extra layer on top of still having good story. You know, so I respect, and I don't think that, you know, comedies get enough credit generally, but I don't really have a preference.
Okay, so flip it like this.
Just good stories.
Okay, we'll flip it like this. What is a movie that you could see over and over again that never gets old?
Every one of the great ones, you know, which to me there are some that nobody ever sees. Like my favorite movie of all time is Ikiru by Kurosawa. Now everybody knows, you know, people know Seven Samurai,
right,
by Kurosawa, or Rashomon by Kurosawa. But you know, when you get into that world, you know, the world of somebody as spectacularly as good as Kurosawa, you know. Now this may go past your entire audience. I don't know. I love, you know, I could watch every Charlie Chaplin movie you know, over and over and over again.
You like Limelight? Did you like Limelight?
Yeah, every one of them, although that's probably a lesser one for me. It's really Modern Times and City Lights.
Yeah, great ones too.
Things with heart. but modern films, which are, I could watch On the Waterfront over and over and over again, and I have,
Great movie.
yeah, pick the really great ones. I understand why Citizen Kane is great. It is great. I understand why Casablanca is great. It is great.
Okay.
These are the good ones. Chinatown. That's if you can come up with a story like that, if you can tell a story like that, that's as good
Okay.
as a script can get.
Gotcha.
And the classic ones are classic ones for a reason, and it's usually because the story. Now, I'll tell you another dumbass thing, which is I've got four grandkids, and I've probably watched the Disney and the Pixar stuff, like 50 million times.
Some of that stuff is great.
It's great.
Yeah.
I mean, like, excuse me, but I defy anybody to watch, especially the better of the Toy Stories and not cry. And Coco is freaking unbelievable.
Hey, Rickles was Mr. Potato Head. How do you not love
Right.
that?
This stuff is brilliant. Honestly, between Coco, Luca, Moana, even, the stuff is beautiful.
Yeah.
So there's stuff roaming around all over the place.
Right.
That's wonderful storytelling. And by the way, I thought both Oppenheimer and Barbie were, my wife and I won our Oscar pool.
Okay.
And I thought Oppenheimer was really well done, just for like this year stuff. It was really well done.
And kudos, you just mentioned your wife. Let me see if I remember the date from my research. I believe that you've been married to your wife since 1978. Is that correct?
71.
Oh,
71.
71? Okay,
Yeah.
I don't know. See, that was wrong. That was wrong the thing too. But 71, so even longer. Well, that's kudos because it's
Yeah,
a
we'll
hell
be
of a time.
53 years in April.
Okay.
So next month,
Okay, April
soon,
what?
actually.
April
April
what?
8th, so soon, really soon.
April 8th. Okay,
8th,
I'm at 8th.
8th.
Okay, I'm an 18th, my birthday. Okay. Want to give you set you up and then answer the question. You are able to go see one artist from any time,
Oh,
and you got front row seats, dead or alive. Who do you want front row seats to?
oh, boy, that's really hard. For really front row seats, and you're saying an artist, right?
Yep, it could be dead or alive.
Yeah, boy, that's a doozy. Um, I'm in a difficult situation in a way because Bruce Springsteen was my opening act.
Oh,
He was good. He's he's really good.
I think he
Um,
went on to a little success.
yeah. Uh, Dead or Alive, my favorite moment in the history of television was the end of the old Jimmy Durante television show when he said "Good night, Mrs. Calabash, wherever
Yeah,
you are,"
yeah.
and walked from spotlight to spotlight. And I hope that for some little kids watching the Shanana television show, um, the end where of "Good night, sweetheart" at the end of the show meant the same kind of thing to them, like they looked forward to it every week. But I wouldn't choose Jimmy Durante's show as the show that I most wanted to see
Right.
and sit in the front row. Uh, I have to think about that one.
Okay. Well, then this one's going to probably get you even
Who it
worse.
really would be among today's entertainers.
I don't. It could be anybody, John. It could
I
be
also
anybody.
know, but I'm going to say a couple of things. I also hired before I went in. Sean and I was music directing off Broadway shows, so we hired this woman, really kind of a girl. She was probably like 21, and I was about the same age. So what am I talking about? But we hired this young woman to be in like this in a show called Salvation. It was like a nothing part. You couldn't do that much with it, and she was fine. She sang well, she was funny, she was good. But she said she had this nightclub act that she did at the Improv, and she was managed by this guy who ran the Improv, Bud Friedman. And
Mhm.
then it was her birthday, like you just said about you, and she said, "Oh, I want you to come see my club act when when on Saturday night because I'm going to do it after our show
Gilda
for my birthday.
Radner. Gilda Radner.
No, Bette Midler.
Oh, okay. Okay.
So so we went to see her club act, and one second you're laughing, the next second you're sobbing, you know, and every one of us went up to her and said, including me, I said, gee, Bet, I had no idea. Like that was the greatest thing I've ever seen. And if I had to pick one entertainer, in my own generation, whose show I would go to, she's the one that has the most that skill. I really respect that skill.
Yeah.
The skill where you can make people laugh and make people cry consecutively.
Okay.
People whose show I never saw. I think Judy Garland would have been too depressing, but brilliant. Edith Piaf.
She's my favorite female singer of all time.
Right. Edith Piaf is somebody whose show I wish I had ever been able to see.
Mm-hmm. The Little Sparrow.
Right. Because it's just such a remarkable voice and such remarkable power.
In the 50s, my father worked at the Fontainebleau. He got his best friend a job there, and he worked in the La Ronde room, very famous room. She sang there, and they were off stage right or stage left watching, and they were in tears. He said she floored them. Just came out in a little black dress, and their voice just, wow.
The funniest show I've ever seen, okay, this is a little bit of a dodge of the question, but the funniest show I've ever seen was a guy who opened to us in Lake Tahoe at the Sahara Hotel in like the mid-70s sometime, must have been like 75. He was our opening act, some guy named Steve Martin.
Ah!
That was the most fall down funny show. Just totally brilliant. Totally top to bottom brilliant, and still have enormous respect for him. We had a lot of people and okay, so in the mid 70s, we had sold out the Asbury Park Civic Center, which we fairly routinely sold out, and then people would go like, "Oh, you should check out your opening act tonight. He's this local guy. He's really good." So I figured, okay, I'll get dressed a little early. I'll check out this opening act because a few people said it, and I don't know, it's some guy with a band with an African-American saxophone player, and, listen to the first song. Listen to the first song and you go like, oh, that was really good. Listen to the second song. It's like, that was really good. But the fifth song, you're going, we're standing on the side of, in the wings. By the fifth song, we're going, how are we going to follow this guy? It was just Bruce and the E Street Band playing.
And you're talking about Clarence Clemens.
Right, playing the Born to Run album. He had the entire E Street Band, and he's playing the Born to Run album. And they were our opening act. And you're going, and that's really pretty good. I mean, that level of stamina. His level of stamina. Even
now in concert,
I've always had good stamina as a performer, so I understand stamina. That level of stamina is impossible.
Yeah,
that's otherworldly.
He's a one-off. There's no other boss.
That's kind of otherworldly,
right?
I really do have to say that's just nuts. And then I'm sure I'm leaving out a gazillion other people.
Well, here, let me hit you with the next one because this is really going to throw you.
Sure.
So if you could meet one person from any time in history,
oh, yeah,
dead or alive, any walk of life, who would you like to meet? And what would you first question or something you'd like to discuss with them?
Abraham Lincoln.
Okay. And what would you like to discuss?
To me, that's easy. I would like to discuss with Abraham Lincoln, how he concluded. I have specific questions for a few people. I would like to discuss with him what led to the conclusion that it was that important to keep the Union together? And could it have ended up better going our separate? We're still fighting the same freaking battles here. Part of me sometimes thinks like, oh, you know what? Go have a nice country. Now at that time that would have been terrible because slavery would have continued, and regardless of what anybody say. But I'd like to have that dialogue. I'd like to understand what went on in the heart and brain and soul of that human to come to that courageous of a conclusion that the greater goal was to keep the Union together. I think that's still a question that's a little bit on the table somewhere, although I think if it were me, I would come to the same conclusion.
Right.
And I'm not quite sure why. If I had time to spend with Barack Obama, who I think is a brilliant guy.
Agree.
There are questions I would ask him, probably most notably, do you regret not taking McCain's suggestion that we just get all the money out of the election? Which was an interesting moment there, where McCain kind of put on the table, because I think McCain also would have been, I had a lot of respect from McCain.
I do too. That's another thing early on we didn't talk about with Trump when he said, I like my war, and I'm retired military. My war here is not captured. That would have ended anybody else's campaign, but those idiot maggots, as I call them, they used to love McCain till Trump told them, don't love McCain. And I said, oh no, we don't love him anymore. I don't care about it. His service is untouchable. And I don't let anybody on the left do it either. His service is untouchable. You can attack him politically all you want, but his 5.5 years in a Hanoi Hilton, he couldn't lift his arm up to comb his own hair. That's untouchable for me. And I remind people that I push back against these veterans for Trump all the time on that specific one.
I worked very hard for Obama,
right?
For a lot of policy reasons. But the day that John McCain was nominated, I said out loud, okay, the country just won. Today, the country just won, because no matter who wins this election, we're going to be fine.
Right.
Now, when Palin came into the picture, which we all know what a horrible misjudgment that was,
right,
it changed a little bit, because she really was dangerous.
Very.
In the kind of Trumpian way, but
yes.
but dumber. Well, I guess you could argue dumber. So certainly more. She was. I always thought of her as manipulative in the same way that I think Trump is manipulative.
And it has nothing to do with because she's a woman. I say if she's an idiot too. She's not as bright as she claims to be.
Well, God knows it has nothing to do with being a woman. Because,
I know, but I'm just saying.
As I said in 2016, which is, I'm a person who has funny conversations with people. I think, in my sort of intellectual Columbia University way, where I'm in the middle of Iowa and we're trying to win the Iowa caucuses for Hillary Clinton, and I'm out with, I had made the statement the entire time, Hillary Clinton is the most qualified non-incumbent to run for president since George Washington. And I still stand by that, although, by the way, Joe Biden is about as qualified as Hillary Clinton was.
Agree.
On paper, they're pretty similar.
Right.
But in 2016, she was the most qualified non-incumbent to run for president since George Washington. And the reason I bring you this up now is I usually got away with saying that with no problem. But I'm out with Barney Frank, who was a history teacher, in 2016. We're wandering around the middle of Iowa, and I said that, and Barney Frank goes like, well, what about James Madison? Okay, all right, you're right. Okay. I didn't think anybody was going to bring up James Madison. Okay, you got me there.
Oh, Barney. Okay.
Anyway,
Go
But
ahead.
I would like to ask Barack Obama a couple of things. I would even ask Barack Obama now, although I can answer the question myself. Do you think it was worth it giving up the rest of the agenda to go for health care in 2008? Because when we lost Congress in 2010, we couldn't get anything else done. And the answer is still yes, but we're still suffering.
Yeah.
We are still suffering from not going after immigration, comprehensive immigration reform then,
Right.
because all we could really get done, all he was really able to get done before, you know, there was going to be the backlash was the ACA.
It's a big thing. At least he got
So
it.
it's a big thing, but it's a
It's a
big
big
thing, and
thing.
it was worth
And,
it.
you talk about how dumb. You go to a rally and they say Obamacare. Oh, I don't like that Obamacare. But then you say, do you like the ACA? Oh, yeah, I like this. It's the same doggone thing. But they just, okay. Let me ask you this because we're going to wrap up in a little bit. With everything we discussed today, and we discussed a lot, John, how would you sum yourself up in a few thoughts as a human being?
Oh, well, we haven't even talked about the senior issues that I work on: Social
We
Security,
are, we are,
Medicare.
we are. I got it here.
Okay, okay. How do I sum myself up as a human being? I try to use my intellect and I think my good heart to do the right thing for the most possible people that I can. Uh, you know, and I try to still stay active and still give, you know, I tried to give 110% as a performer, and I still try to do that, but I try to give 110% of myself as a human being to try to do the right thing. And that's how I spend my life. That's, you know, I love my life. I've been super lucky. Uh, you know, I think I got fairly far with pretty limited talent. I don't know whether if I'd gone in another direction, let's say, and become a lawyer and a political figure, you know, after that or something like that, I don't know how my life would have turned out. But I'm kind of, I used to have a friend that I used to discuss this with, which is like a Stephen Colbert word, where we decided we were kind of Renaissance-y. I'm a little bit Renaissance-y. Everything interests me. And still at this age, there's so much I want to learn and so much I want to know and so much I want to see and so much I want to do that I know that I'm not going to have enough lifetime to do it all.
Okay.
But having said all of that, the next 8 months to me really do have to be for all of us.
Yes.
For all of us, stay focused and make sure that we defeat this. This is really dangerous. This is the most dangerous thing that's
in our lifetime.
right
Our lifetime.
for somebody as old as me, you know, but you know, you were a little kid. You know, you're constantly asked about Watergate. You know, this is nothing like
No,
Watergate.
he makes
Watergate,
Nixon look like a choir boy.
Absolutely. No comparison whatsoever. This is really dangerous. This is blowing up all the institutions, blowing up
Yes.
all the norms, trying to destroy the judiciary, trying to destroy the checks and balances. There is every single thing is on the table. It's violent. You know, and in the end result, Nixon, you know, who was a crook.
But John, but you know what? And then I want to talk about the two things I want to get out,
Yeah.
your other stuff. The thing with Nixon though that he didn't do, he was a racist. He was a jerk. He was dirty. But when he left, when he resigned, he didn't take every single MF day to do what no president in our history. You got me
Not
by
even close.
every day since Trump. Not even every day since, but he lost election when he got in a plane and didn't go to President Biden's inauguration, which was disgusting in itself. Got in a plane and played Sinatra. If Sinatra was alive, he'd punch him in his mouth and play him my way. Every single day, he's attacked this administration with out and out lies. Nixon didn't do that. He didn't do it to Ford. He didn't do it to Carter. He didn't do it. He didn't do it. So
he didn't want to blow up the institutions. He actually respected the institutions at the end of the day. He was a terrible racist. He was a crook.
Right.
but he respected the institutions at the end of the day, and it was
Right.
and consequently was very different. This is really about, hey guys, we're going to be living in Russia. If, we got to come through here. We are the cavalry. There is no cavalry. It's us.
It's us. John, talk about you're president of the Social Security Works PAC, and you're also the vice chair for DNC Seniors Council. So talk about that, both of those, please.
Yeah, so I'm very proud of this work, and I've been doing it for quite a long time. Because my audience is older. The Bowzer audience is older, and consequently, I'm known to older people. I've made myself an expert on senior issues being Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, drug prices, very important. And really the part of the agenda that this particular administration has done the best on. Been magnificent. We've got stuff that's never happened before. Medicare is negotiating with the pharmaceutical companies for the first time in history to lower the price of 10 drugs, and it's going to get more. It's going to get bigger, and President Biden has promised expansion of it. Next year, 2025. $2,000 cap on your drug costs for a year. It's a BFD, as the president would say. So I'm going to be giving a talk, for example, next on Thursday. I'm going down to Laguna Woods, the biggest retirement community in California, and giving an hour talk on Medicare Advantage and the dangers of Medicare Advantage. There's a lot of ins and outs of things, but then we're really going to pull the plug on the Medicare Advantage issue in April because we're in an election cycle, and it's more important to make sure that the people we're going to be arguing with about how to deal with the Medicare Advantage problem need to be Joe Biden, not Donald Trump. we're first things first. So, I am proud of my work, because it's public policy oriented work. And I really try to educate myself as best I possibly can, and consequently, and hone down my messaging for other people so that it's effective. And then really my main goal is we're at Social Security Works, we're going to endorse a lot of candidates in this cycle, as we always do. And they're going to be the people who are better on these issues. It's very important to know, this is sort of a complex cycle in one way, and in another way, it's pretty simple. Because if we don't defeat Donald Trump, and frankly, at this point, the Republican Party, which is the MAGA Republican Party, this hasn't always been the case, but we're going to end up living in Russia. So there's a lot of things on the table here. Obviously, reproductive freedom is massively on the table. Democracy itself is on the table.
LGBTQ rights.
Right. LGBT, everything's on the table. But senior issues are also on the table.
Right.
During this past, and importantly so, just during this past week, Donald Trump said, in answer to a question about entitlements, which, by the way, we call Social Security and Medicare entitlements. They are earned benefits.
Thank you.
His answer to the question was, yeah, we're going to have to look at cutting entitlements. I'm into cutting entitlements. So, he said it out loud. When he was president, he did the best he could to try to cut your Social Security and Medicare. We stopped him, and he didn't really accomplish very much. But God knows he tried.
Yes, he did.
And in the meantime, the Biden budget came out the next day after Trump talked about cutting the programs. The Biden budget came out and talked about expanding the programs. So we have a very stark choice with regard to the issues that I work on 24/7, but I try not to restrict myself and stay in. This is not a good time to stay in one's lane. I actually think we've all got to get in each other's lanes to some extent and acknowledge the importance of everybody's work. And Brad, that also includes, like, we work on veterans issues because they cross over. Generally speaking, these one thing that really is true about Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, drug prices is that they cross a lot of lines as issues. They meander into all kinds of populations. They affect young people and old people, but they also affect veterans. They affect um, Republicans as much as they affect Democrats, and they affect independents as much as they affect Democrats and Republicans. And people are aware of it. You know, even a simple thing like whether you use the word entitlements. In my experience, you know, doing events, everybody hates that. Republicans hate it. Only elected Republicans use it. Republican voters hate referring to those programs as entitlements. Independents hate it. Everybody hates it. Obviously, Democrats hate it. You know, everybody cares about their drug prices. Everybody cares about whether they have to cut their pills in half, you know, in order to afford groceries. You know, these are the best crossover issues that there are. And consequently, I'm really happy to work on them, and it's going to be a very big year, but I also don't intend to really stay in my lane very effectively. We're all going to be in each other's lane.
And you know what?
Everything's on the line.
We have to. Everything is on the line.
Everything's on the line. That's why.
Okay, let's do this. What's your social media platforms where your fans can follow you? I know Twitter. What is your handle?
Yeah, my biggest one still is Twitter, which, you know, I have mixed feelings about, but we have a messaging group that goes out on Twitter, and we try to make hashtags trend, and we're really good at it. So we stay on there. So I'm at John Bowzer Bauman on Twitter, and I'm also at John Bowzer Bauman on Threads, or, you know, whether it's an ad, I'm not even sure. I don't use Threads that much.
Okay. All right. I'm gonna close out with a few thoughts. Then we're gonna take a pause, and John is gonna do something for the viewers. I'm not gonna tell you what it is. It's a surprise. We're gonna pause and then we'll come back. But John, I want to thank you for coming on today. I want to thank you for using your voice and your platform for activism. You're a mensch. Melissa Manchester was just on my show. She's a dear friend of mine.
I love her.
And you mentioned Bette Midler. She was part of the Kennedy Center Honors when
Right.
Bette got put in. And that's something, by the way, we'd have no Kennedy Center Honors and really nothing for the arts under Trump either. We'd even go, that's another show to talk about, but because, you know, he doesn't care about the arts. But
not even remotely.
No, his arts is.
But all you've got is Ted Nugent and Kid Rock. You're really in.
Well, that's not artists. Those are creeps.
But this doesn't count.
No. But thank you for using your voice. I greatly appreciate it. I've followed you on Twitter for quite a while. And I see you don't pull no punches either. I curse a little bit more than you do publicly, but you
I could do it. I wasn't too sure about that.
Oh yeah, you can curse. No, but I do it on Twitter all the time. I do my videos, but I appreciate your voice because it does make a difference. And you know, you could ride out the rest of your years and just, you know, enjoy your life and just, you know, do nothing. But obviously, that's not you going back to school.
No way. And I'm in a beautiful part of California right here, you know, in the Santa Ynez Valley. I really could have a wonderful, you know, retirement. But this is not the time, guys. This is all hands on deck.
Right.
And that if there's one message that I'm trying to get out today, that is it. So all of us, every one of us, in whatever way we can, all hands on deck between now and next November, and let's hope that we'll still be living in America the Beautiful after next November, and this doesn't turn into a real horror show.
Okay, I'm going to pause here, folks, and then we're going to set up, and we'll be right back.
Well, I'm over here at the piano because Brad experienced this as the 2020 theme song. Because there was the 2020 theme song. But here's the problem. It's also the 2024 theme song. We can't get rid of this damn theme song. Oh, when is this ever going to end? And the answer is November. It better end in November. Because how much more of this can we take? You used to know this as good night, sweetheart. Well, it's time to go. I've given you a hint as to who needs to go during this past, like, I don't know, hour and a half that we did. So sing along with me. I'll bet you can figure it out. Good night, Donald Trump. Well, it's time to go. Good night, Donald Trump. Well, it's time to go. Don't hate to leave you, but we really must say good night, Donald Trump. Good night. Good night, Donald Trump. Good night. And take all of MAGA with you. Good night, Donald Trump. Vote for Joe Biden. Because on the night of November 5th, in order to remain living in America, Joe Biden's got to be doing this.
Bravo. I love it, John. All right, brother. Hey, it was like I said, it was wonderful talking to you today. And let's stay in touch. If we could help each other out anyway, let me know. You got access. I'll send you my number on a separate in a DM or email, and let's stay in touch.
Sounds great. Yeah, that's enough of this theme song, guys. This has got to be the end.
Absolutely.
Peace.
Absolutely. All right. Take care, John. Have a good day.
You too.